Hi everyone, in the middle of the holidays, we are going live here because of the special moment in the life of my guests and we just didn't want to wait for too long. Today I am joined by Tessy and Frank Floessel, sorry that I pronounced probably wrong, but I'm very happy that you're joining and very grateful that you have found time. I know that it's a very special period in your life. You just got married last week, congratulations for that. And now you're waiting for a baby to come, and that can come anytime. That's why I decided to not wait. So Tessy, Frank, warmest welcome to Genius Leadership Podcast.
Thank you so much, Anna. It's a pleasure to be here.
I know that you, Tessy, are an experienced podcaster yourself. You have a show since last year, and you're usually often sitting on the other side of the microphone, so to say. But today we're turning the tables, and I would really love to discuss with both of you the topic of the whole living. Quite often we hear this work-life balance expression, and I would love to dig deep into how you see the topic and what your opinions about it, because you are both successful entrepreneurs, you do so much in your work life, but you also have family, you also have each other, and you contribute to the society and the community. So how do you find this balance, integration? Maybe you're using some other word. This is something that I would like to dig into today. But first of all, I usually start with the question of, when you hear words sustainable business performance, what comes to your mind?
Sustainable business performance.
Yes.
Well, I think I have one thought that comes to mind is when you're young, you really want to get started and do things as fast as possible, and that often is not sustainable. And you see that by people burning out and ending up in situations they didn't want to be in the first place. They didn't plan. I think life is complicated. It's always good when you think of it as a marathon, so you don't go full in and sprint, because you cannot sprint for 42 kilometers as a marathon. So it's always good to be to keep a little bit of energy in the reserve, so to say, that sustainability is possible. Because otherwise, like in my situation, when you're an entrepreneur, you have people that depend on you, and you have to be there. You have to make sure that the company steers in the right direction. And if it doesn't, because you personally are burned out or you're not able to deliver anymore, then a lot of livelihoods, or many livelihoods, are at stake. That comes to mind.
I love this answer, Frank, because it almost sounds like you've heard some of my interviews, because that's exactly the analogy I'm using with the marathon, that we can't sprint for the whole 42 kilometers. Why do you think it happens usually? And you mentioned especially when we are young. So do you feel like we're learning with age, with experience? What's happening there?
Yeah, absolutely.
I think we can't do it anymore. When I started my first company, I was I was 25, I think, yeah. And I mean, I can only speak for myself, but I had so much energy, I sometimes couldn't even sleep at night, right? Because I had so much things going on in my head, and I wanted to realize that, and I figured out, okay, we should do this as a service, we should do that, we should think about this. I wrote business plans in my head, came the next day to the office, told them, listen, guys, you have to do something new. This is the idea. And I really lived, I would even say, for weeks and months, 24/7 in my head, in my company, right? And now, I mean, I guess we have filled up our lives a bit too, right? We have children, we have many other topics that we cannot be there 24/7 anymore. And that makes you slow down a bit, because you also value other topics in life, at least as much as your company.
Yeah, exactly. I have often when people just tell me, oh, Tessy, you lived the life of an 80 or 90-year-old woman, because I do so many things. And how do I do it? And it's exactly that. You know, I started very young. I'm very ambitious. I had that energy. I still do have a lot of energy, but it is true, as my husband just said, that you do slow down, also because your priorities change. You know, when we were young, on my side, I had kids very early. That's true. But still, also with that, you know, I still had the drive of I wanted to be successful, finishing my studies, be successful in business, being a good mom. you fit it all in and it still works. But now, looking at our kids, they're teenagers, we have our companies together, we have also independent companies of each other, and we're expecting a new baby. And I must say that coordination and communication are more important now than the ambition and the drive and energy we had before to make it work. Because before you just made it work, and now it's just there's so many different other factors that play in that need to be considered in order for it to work in the first place. And that is also fantastic. It's a great learning, and that comes definitely, I think, with some maturity and age, rather than when you're in your early 20s.
I love this answer, Tessy, because this thing that what you said, that communication and coordination are more important than ambition, it sounds so not sexy, so to say, but no one is discussing it in the entrepreneurship world, right? You need to be ambitious, you need to have the drive, and sure, those things are the things that are important to succeed. But what you're saying is so much deeper and sustainable, right? Just as the question was that we started with. So how did you learn that as a couple, as entrepreneurs, working together, living together? What were those stages, if we say it that way, going from being driven and ambitious to still having the ambitions, but paying attention to those less sexy things, so to say?
Well, I think you just, I leave my husband to do the stages one, as he is a coach of CEOs and so on. He will have that fresh in his mind. But for me, it is really, you learn it the hard way. You either learn to organize yourself from experience, which happened to me, because it just doesn't always fit then. And then it's kind of like if you try to take shortcuts, for example, or other things, it doesn't always work. So it's really a process that you really need to think about. I also, for me personally, when I was young, nothing, it always seemed so easy, the things at work, for example, and I always said, oh yeah, I can get that done. I do that today, I do this here. It was so fast, everything was always so fast, and I didn't always think it all through. And I think that is definitely something that I learned over time, just because the experience has shown me that the results are not always as effective as I wanted them to be, or as they could have been straight away. They might as well eventually ended up there, but the route was longer just because I took shortcuts at the beginning, because I was too ambitious and too excited to take the time to think it through. And so I think there's definitely some steps to consider.
Well, see, for me, when I started my second company, I was a couple of times in the US at trainings, right? I went to Stanford for a week, went to several trainings at several US universities where it was a group of entrepreneurs, and we had a week-long courses. And I would always come back after these trainings and would be so energized and tell all my board team, say, okay, guys, we have this new idea. We're going to do it this way, this way, this way. And after a while, I realized they didn't understand anything what I was saying, right? They just basically said, okay, yes, he comes back with this wave of ideas, and normally they're going to calm down after a while, and then it's going to be normal again.
Sometimes he does have that still.
Yeah, but much less than I used to have it. And so I realized if you don't communicate the ideas correctly and make sure you have everybody behind you, it's you, and then there's, for a long time, nobody, and then comes the rest of the team, right? And if you don't bring them along on the journey, you can't build a company by yourself, right? You need to have all the support you can get. And that means you have to make sure you communicate all the ideas as clearly to everyone, matching their level of experience and education, right? Everybody has to understand what the company does and why it does it. If it's only you, it's a great vision. The board might be excited and the investors, but if the employees don't get it, it's not going to happen, right? And so therefore, communicating is a really key factor of the whole thing.
I think you're tapping into a very important part, Frank. One of my guests on the show has said that if you're running as a leader too fast, you're not a leader because you're walking alone. And that's what you're just saying.
Yeah.
And it's a problem because it's as if you have understood math and the other person hasn't, right? For you, it's clear because in German you say the 50 cents fell down, right? It made click in your mind. You're like, it's absolutely obvious. That's how it is, right? And especially when you come back I mean, I always came back from these trainings with other entrepreneurs who were about as energized and ADHD as I was, ADHD, than I was, right? So they were all in the same vibration, so to say, right? Excited to do stuff. Then you come back and you have an employee who may not, in a complete different set of mind, right? And if you don't pick him up from that mindset that the person has, and you just tell him your story, and it's like, okay, it's clear, this is where it has to go. And the guy says, well listen, 2 weeks ago you told us this, and now you're coming back and telling us something else. There is only confusion left, right?
Mm.
And
so how did you learn to communicate better and get people on board?
Well, I would say by running into the wall a few times and realizing that all these amazing plans that I written didn't happen, then I started to question myself and say, how is that possible that for me it's so clear and I'm the only one, right? So then I started to distribute books to my executive team. So really, I almost started a book club, I would say, right? We had like month intervals of reading, like the classics, Jim Collins, Good to Great. There's a couple books I would say are absolutely needed or are very valuable if you want to found and grow a company. And we read those together, and we tried to, like a book club, we tried to give each other ideas and thoughts and said, look, if the example of the company is this, how can we take this example into our company here, right? And so
he makes me read these books too.
Oh, you're part of the executive team on some of the companies, so that just makes sense. So how does that go for you, Tessy? Does that make it easier for you to understand Frank's ideas and mission and vision?
No, that is definitely something that I fell in love with my husband. It's just his drive for innovation and change and just being one step ahead at all times. I really, really like that about him. But it is true, it is something that wasn't always very natural to me. And so sometimes I myself find myself sitting there and I'm like, oh, what is he talking about? Or he comes back from a meeting and he's like, he's super excited. And I'm so excited to see him excited. And I'm like, okay, let's talk about it or tell me about it. And then we take it apart because, it does happen sometimes that I do catch him too overly excited, and then after he's like, "Oh, yeah, I didn't realize that." So that I say, "Okay, this is really great, but how or what are you really talking about here, or have you?" So it's a really nice communication between us as well. So yeah, I really like that innovation, and I learn a lot from Frank and the way he works. Also, I have implemented a lot into my companies. And it makes totally sense what he's doing. He really has a brain of an entrepreneur. I'm an entrepreneur too, but I learned from him. He knows what he's talking about, and that I really like. But it also shows that still, even the best entrepreneurs, you still keep learning, and that applies to him as well. And I think that is that nice interaction as well that we are celebrating when we're working together. And when we're discussing things together, let it be business, but even family coordination, that's almost a big business on its own. We're kids all over the world and so on. And it's really, it's a really interesting way of getting from A to B, to do it the way Frank has taught me so far.
So question to you, Frank, with what you said, like earlier, when you were younger, you used to be in the business mode, so to say, 24/7 in your mind. And you said it slowly, it's now getting better. And now, Tessy is working with you in part, or some of the companies, right? So when you come home, you kind of have the permission, or come home, you're working from home, but when you are home and not in a home office, you, in a way, have a permission to talk about business continuously, right? Do you have any strategies to switch off that way of thinking? And also, Tessy, do you have any strategies to help Frank with that?
So yeah, sometimes I really just tell him, stop. Mm-hmm. I really say it's enough now. We talked about that all day or since a few weeks, and now it's weekend. We have family time, so I stop him. Mm-hmm. That's true. Or when I really want to just spend some husband-wife time, What I did in the past, like for example, when I told him that I'm expecting our baby, I sent him a calendar invite with a restaurant invitation to the most important person of his life, and he better show up. And that was just about us. And so that I do as well. That I schedule meetings just for us during the week. The weekends normally are quite sacred. So if there's not something really pressing when it comes to either investments that we're having or Frank's businesses that he has on the side or mine, then we try on the weekends to really keep it as a family weekend for us, where we just play games and do things families should be doing. And we try to avoid topics on business and finance and so on. But for the rest, it is what it is. It is a hybrid model. If you're working from home now with Corona as well, the lines are quite blurred, right? Because you do work and the same space you're working in. Yes, we're having an office in the house, but still, you're still in the same place and you see each other then for lunch. And to switch off just from one room, which is 10 meters away, to the kitchen table is hard. And so it also asks for diligence and just commitment as well towards the private part of life then as well. So it's not always a given, but it's something you also need to invest in, as you would invest in your business. And something I tell Frank very often when we have these conversations about the relationship, I always tell him, I want our relationship to be for him and for me as our biggest business deal. How much effort do you put in? How much time, and diligence and respect and work, right? I think we do it for business in a great way, but I also expect the same then for our private life, because that should be, if not more important, because we work to live and we don't live to work, right?
I love it.
What do you think, Mike?
No, I just had a thought, and that was to your earlier question, right? How did I learn not to be in business 24/7? And in a way, it's when I think back, 1998, nobody talked about mindfulness, meditation, sleep is for the weak, or whatever the jokes were, right? I mean, I had a couple of friends who would join consulting companies. They would be at least as crazy as I was. So I thought, okay, that's what you do, right? And nowadays, I think people have realized sleep is much more important than maybe they thought 20 years ago, right? There's great literature about sleep. And suddenly it becomes clear that if you just run like a crazy person, you're not going to be as fast as if you're rested and you have a bit more depth in your thoughts, and you can just think clear, right? You don't have to have you don't need 5 coffees in the morning to be able to have a clear thought, right? You don't need that pushing up and pushing down stuff. And so the weekends, I would say, to your question now, the weekends I really try to not be on my phone work-wise at all, right? I really think it's not healthy for anyone. And I think when I look back, I sometimes was guilty of pushing my employees or my teams to do work on Sunday or ask my questions on Sunday. But now I know it's too intrusive, right? Because if you are the head of the company and you set this standard that you have to be available 24/7, people will do that because you're the boss and you tell them what to do, but people will burn out and will leave the company and you lose talent. So you have to also make sure that they switch off their phones and are not available for you, which is then a point that, okay, you cannot get this question answered right now because nobody's there, or you don't want to bother anyone at 10 o'clock at night or on the weekends. And I think then it's really about, so when I'm thinking a long time, when in my thoughts a long time about my company, I don't know what happens in my brain exactly, but I'm really into this logic, right? So then I kind of go through scenarios, I go through pricing models or whatever, and it really I lose part of my life then, right? I lose emotions, feelings, because I'm purely rational and in a very rational functioning way. And I've noticed that when I'm working too long, then I don't recover easily from that anymore. I cannot just switch back and be the loving husband and loving father and have fun with them. I'm really kind of a grumpy, right? I'm a bit grumpy because I realize, oh, these emotions, I didn't have them for the whole day. So now I kind of have to go back in my brain and look up and say, okay, yes, this is how I behave when I'm a loving father, right? Or a loving husband.
What a beautiful observation. And what's your strategy then to kind of include emotion throughout the day so that you don't get emotionally stiff?
I can't, right? I'm really trying to make more pauses then, and really trying to limit the time that I spend in that hyper-rational space, so to say.
He has a little sticky note on his computer sometimes which says, "Go kiss Tessy." So that's really sweet, just like a little break.
Yeah, but I need that too. When you work on a financial model, you completely dive into numbers. It's only numbers in your head. And then you really have to kind of crawl out, and that's why these sticky notes help me then.
And you see it, and then you go and do it.
Exactly.
That's wonderful. Tessy, in the pre-chat, we talked with you about this mom guilt, right? And how you, as an entrepreneur, have to choose your battles sometimes and make sure that your priorities are set right. And I would like to discuss that as well. How do you, both of you, find your way between all the juggling balls of parenting, of the entrepreneurship, of being a loving partner to each other and contributors to the local communities?
Well, I think it's really, as I said before, when it comes to my husband, I really set the priority as I would for a big business deal. I really put time, effort, love, respect. I respect his time, and I really put care into our relationship as much as I would for any other things in business. For my children, of course, they are much smaller, because Frank understands if I'm really also in my head, I'm working on my PhD at the moment, or my different companies, or our company, or whatever it is again. He understands that sometimes I'm like, oh, another 10 minutes, and he's like, okay, no problem. He can relate to it because it happens to him too, or he's late for our meeting. That's fine too. I'm not happy about that, but it happens. And but the kids, they are smaller, and it's hard for them to always understand that mama and papa need to work, or mama and stepdad, or stepmom and dad, or whatever, whichever the kid is. And so with them, I always try to really communicate and explain what I'm doing, why am I doing it, share the projects we're doing, talk about the importance of it for business-wise, but also, as you said before, I'm very involved in community work. So a lot of my work actually is also linked to social work, to community outreach and advocacy campaigns and so on. And to also show that it's important to give back and to include them. So I try to include my children as well. They're old enough now, but I have always included them since they're very small.
How did you include them when they were 2-3 years old? Now it's a question, a selfish question, because my daughter is that age, and I try to include her. Sometimes she's drawing next to me in the meetings, but she just wants to talk to me, and she takes my face and just looks eye into eye, 5 centimeters away between the faces, and I understand that she wants attention.
Yes, and I think it's the same here, and I think now with Corona as well, having the kids home 24/7, as many parents have experienced, and me too, we had them home almost a whole year. It's really, they will come. Like before we started recording the live stream, my son came in to cook, right? And I said, hey, we are doing a live now. Can you come back later and we cook together, right? We do it later. Just because you will do noise and it will not be great. And he's like, oh, okay, I understand. Then he goes. And it's just really that communication, the constant communication. And yes, sometimes when I have conferences, they don't want to come. They're bored, They also want to do other things, or be on their phones, or see their friends, or do some other things. But, they cannot, I think they learn a lot from seeing that they can't learn in the classroom. And that is always how I have raised my sons. That even though sometimes it's boring, and I tell them too, and I relate it to them then, I say, well, sometimes you do things that I'm doing with you that I find boring. And I still love doing it because it's important to you. So that's how we connect, that they understand that sometimes, we are different people, we have different characters, different preferences and interests, and that's okay. But because we love each other, we make that time and that effort. And so, yeah, it's a constant communication. Now, of course, we have 3 teenagers who are scattered all over the world and in different schools and here and there. And now we have a new baby coming. So that will definitely shake up our family dynamic a little bit, also because we have never had that before. So how we're going to deal with that will be seen, right? How much can we offer to be with the baby? When do I go back to work? I had a job interview here because I want to settle a little bit more in Switzerland. I think, the reason being is I like working a little bit more for corporates when I change countries, because you get to know the culture a bit more working in a company than being an entrepreneur where you're alone really all the time. And so I chose to apply for jobs, and I had one specific one that I really liked. And I had a job interview and they said, "Ooh, you're really pregnant." And I said, "Yes, I am. I am very pregnant." And we talked about work and everything. And then they said, "Well, how are you going to manage that, right? When could you start?" And I said to them, "Well, I don't know, October or something like that. That would be already fantastic." And they straight away came to me then, which I really loved. And they said, "Well, we want your brain, not your body. And your brain is what we're hiring, your strategy that you can provide." And then they said, "And don't worry anyways, we're still, with Corona, it really changed. Now an excuse of people saying you can't work from home anymore doesn't work anymore, because everyone knows it does, right? And that an office logistic building, kind of it's useful because you can have a different chemistry exchange with your colleagues and team members, but it also is a bit redundant in some ways or another, right? So we are moving towards something new, a new hybrid, right? And yes, there will be meetings in person, and that's not a problem. But I think that new flexibility that men and women have as parents now working from home and kind of creating that hybrid work environment, private environment for them is definitely beneficial. And I will definitely take advantage of that as well once baby is there. And also my husband works from home and so on. So I think that is a bit, to go to your question again, the long answer to that, I think it's really about, again, coordination and really communication. I think a kid, we always think that when they're 2 or 3 years old, they don't understand. They understand very well. And I think
that's almost too much.
Yes, it's really time. It really, as a parent, must take the time to explain to your kid as well, why do you need to go there now? Or why can't you play Lego with them now? And it's fine, it's part of life, and it's important for children to know that if you want to change society for the better, you need to contribute. And as an adult, when you work, that is your contribution to society, right? Or whatever your work is. For me, that is, in a lot of ways. I want them to understand that I'm not with them all the time, not because I don't want to, but because there's also other things that are important to me, and that I'm a woman as well, and not just a mother, but I'm also a businesswoman, and that I also have things that I like to do for myself without feeling guilty about it.
That's an interesting point, but I think the point is, in the end, you want to give them the message that you do something because you want to do it. And they should do that too, right? They should do something because they really like it, right? So they discover a passion they have, right? For me, it's always been Lego and puzzling, right? So I love to puzzle, and I was really able to draw my daughter into puzzling as well. We started very early on with very simple puzzles, and now we do 500 and 1,000 piece puzzles pretty quickly, right? It was always the passion behind it, right? And it was always okay, and I would always have time, or try to find time for puzzling, right? It's really to really show her also this I would say word in fashion, grit, right? The endurance to really solve a problem, even though it doesn't look nice, a puzzle when you have 1,000 pieces and they really don't look like they would fit together, but in the end it's one picture, right? And a Lego piece is the same thing. And I think having them develop grit and having them realize, sometimes it is not appropriate for them to be in the center of attention, right? It is okay, they are kids, we spend time with them, and when we spend time with them, we try to be as attentive as possible and have them really full. We really are fully aware of them, and we give them all, right, so to say. But then there's times when we're busy, and that means we have to be left alone, right?
Exactly.
As they should be left alone when they have to do homework, right? Which is, these days they can do homework and listen to music and play on their phone. And I say always, no, it's not going to work. You need your full brain capacity to do the homework. Same way we use our whole brain when we do our stuff. So monotasking.
Those are great examples.
Right.
Thanks, Tessy and Frank. Frank, I'd like to ask you, because you have led a company, you built a company to a couple of hundred, several hundred people, right? And what Tessy now said as an example from her job interview, that they were understanding, right? They were open, but there were still those questions like, oh, you're so pregnant or very pregnant, right? How did you work on building the culture, the truly inclusive culture in your company that would really allow everyone to tap into their passions and their potential without restraining them too much?
All right, how much time do we have?
14 minutes.
No, I would say this. And that's also when I'm coach now, I think that's my number one question is, what are your corporate values? Because corporate values are the cornerstone of a culture. When you have, and we had those, you just take some values that resonate most. I needed about half a year to get those values up and running. I had a team at that time. We were in the core company, about 40 people, and I took about 5 from all different sections, not just board people. I had really from all levels, all ages. I had people, and we just talked about, there's this typical exercise when you would send people to the moon, right? So you have a delegation of astronauts from your company going to the moon, not because you want to send them on the moon, that they're gone, but to represent your company. And so then you ask yourself, okay, so who should be on that flight? And if the people on the moon see them, if there were people on the moon, how would they react to that, right? So for example, we had this one lady who was really strict in bookkeeping. Everybody was kind of afraid of her, because if you would come to her, approach her with the wrong numbers, you were not ready at the time, she would kind of tear you apart. But there was precision, right? A precision in an amazing way, because she really distilled that discipline for everyone, right? And so we came up with 5 values, and those values, I'm not sure, upstairs in my office, I have a little booklet where I had them.
I really like that.
We would give it out to every employee. So once you have these values, recruiting becomes very easy. So for example, one of our values was passion. So when you have an interview, you say, okay, tell me about your passions. And if the person says, what do you mean by passion? Then it's over, right? So it's really the idea that people who resonate with these values, they're going to fit your culture. And once you have people who fit the culture, things become very easy. Because every decision you have to make, you look at your values and you say, look, but this is against our values, or this is in accordance with our values. And that makes it very easy to make decisions very quickly. I always say, or actually I stole it. One of my coaches once said, finding the values is super hard, but after that, every decision becomes easy. And it's true, right? Because you notice when you have a set of values that really resonate with you, you're going to be like, wow, that's the one, right? Once you have those and you find other people who have that same emotional feedback when they hear the values, then everything is going to be great, because you don't even need to be there, because they're going to be there. They have the same respect for these values. So they're going to get the right people in the company, and these right people are matching people who are going to create the right culture. Then it's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy. The only thing is, if you as the boss, for example, one of our values was being on time. We did a lot of technical support teams, a lot of team stuff that had to be in shifts, had to be on time, right? And honestly, I was not the person who was on time the most, right? But I decided that value was important for the company. So I said, okay, being on time is a value. So every time I would come late to a meeting, everyone would laugh at me and say, haha, look at your values, right? And I allowed that, right? I didn't say, hey, I'm the boss, you can't say that. But I said, okay, you're right. I violated that value. So when we had these monthly all-hand meetings, basically, I would say it starts at 11 o'clock. So I would lock the door at 11 o'clock. And everybody who wasn't there had to wait outside. and they wouldn't get the information. They then had to go and ask other people to get the information, because I wanted to make sure that value is there and it's lived. If you violate your own values, then they become kind of jokes, right? For example, in Switzerland, when we have banks who pretty much care about bonuses and money, and then they come up with fancy values, you're like, yeah, right. Nobody believes that value, right? So it's creating a culture, I think, is absolute key, and corporate values is key for a successful growth of a company.
I really like what you said, Frank, about how easy everything becomes once you have nailed those that really resonate with you. I call it the inner compass. It really becomes like navigating life becomes really much more straightforward. It's not always easy. Life is still life. It's complicated and it's hard sometimes, right? But it's simple to make choices because you have this North Star within yourself that really resonates with you. And it applies to person, but it applies to the corporate culture and all the employees as well. Yeah. So thanks for sharing. Tessy, do you have anything to add to the value conversation there, or how to build a culture that it's truly inclusive?
I agree with him, and I really like. I have seen the little cards he had. That was one of the first things he showed me when we met, because we met in a business environment, and yeah, no, I really like it that he always emphasized on it. I see him as well with his work when he is coaching now all kinds of incredible and innovative companies in Europe and beyond. And that is really always the first framework, the first thing he puts in place, that question about the company values with his coachees. And I really like it. And I agree with him that it is essential, because if you don't align with the people you're working with, it's not going to work, right?
Well, it's going to work for a while, and then it's going to explode completely, right? Because so there's a four quadrant matrix that you can basically sign, right? You can have on one axis is performance, on the other axis it's behavior according to the values. So you have 4 quadrants, from not behaving according to the values and not performing, to behaving according to the values and performing, behaving not against the values but performing, and the other one performing but not behaving against the values. So what happens is, if you have a system that creates performance, you're going to have people that are going to perform great but don't listen to the values, because they're going to be late. They're going to say, yeah, that's a joke. I don't care. My train is late, and so on. And you're going to have some people of the company say, oh, this guy is kind of cool, right? I'm going to go with him. So suddenly you have 2 parties in the company, one that say, hey, I follow my boss because he said that's what it is. And the other one who's like, no, I'm going to go with that cool guy because he seems to be kind of a leader too, right? Like the alpha and omega model of leadership, right? And then eventually you're going to have a big enough group that's not going to follow you anymore, but follows that other guy, or just ignores you as a boss and says, yeah, whatever. It's going to change anyway again. And that the company is going to explode. It's not going to work anymore. People might quit. People might start a competing company. People might just be fed up. If you have investors,
frustrated,
they may kick you out as a leader of the company, because then you didn't deliver, right? I mean, that is, I think, the most dangerous thing, to just have no values and say, yeah, we do that later. I hear that so many times. Yeah, we have values. I don't know exactly. We talked about them last year. They're somewhere in the deck, and I said, what are the values? Like, I don't know. I have to look them up. Then you don't have values. You have something written on paper. And it's a funny thing too, right? Because it's kind of a soft thing. And you would say, well, you need, product market fit and KPIs and all these number stuff. You need that too. But if you miss on the values, then it's not going to work. And for me, the first couple of years, we didn't have the values in place in a very consequent form, and it didn't work. Only once we had the values in place, the company would double the revenue within 24 months, basically. And then again, you're like, wow, okay, something we did right now.
That's very good story to tell, right? And show like, yeah, it takes time to nail them down, but it's totally worth it, and it really affects the bottom line, because we entrepreneurs, we do need to take care of that. Just as you said earlier in the interview, that people depend on us, right? And livelihood of our employees and their families depend on us. So we do need to care about the bottom line. And this is one of the ways, or one of the important ways to really make sure that we run our business in a sustainable way. and we can support our employees.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Thanks so much for sharing. I would like to wrap up, just be mindful of your time. I usually ask 3 questions. One of them is easy. If people want to learn more about what you do or try to work with you somehow, what's the best way to find the way to you?
Well, Frank has an amazing website called Floessel.consulting. So you can find him there if you want to have him as a coach. I think he's a fabulous coach. I get it for free at home, but I think it's good to every company. Then
I have a LinkedIn profile
yes.
with a bit what I'm doing at the moment, what my history is. Yeah. I'm not that present in the public, I would say, right? I know people who want to talk to me and don't want to work with me, they're going to find me. And yeah.
I had a lot of clients, actually, funny enough, on LinkedIn as well. A lot of people can see my work, my companies. There's websites all over my LinkedIn. You can find everything you want on my LinkedIn, the Tessy, Antony, the Nassau. But funny enough, yeah, at least 60-70% of my clients that ended up being my clients, they wrote me on Instagram.
Okay.
So they wrote a direct message on Instagram, and I'm not talking about small corporates, like really big corporates, City, Vodafone, and others. They wrote me on Instagram first in a direct message. So I guess as we're going with modern times, my Instagram as well with a direct message works really well. Well, it has worked well in the past for people to contact me and see what we could do for them together or within our different other ventures we're having.
I'll put the links to your both LinkedIn and your Tessy's Instagram, and also the web pages that people can easily connect with you just from the show notes or from this post on the social media. I'm seeing comments here that have come earlier. Carlotta saying amazing couple, and she was also saying earlier that she's loving the conversation. And then Don Reby wrote a great topic quite early in the interview. So people are appreciating your sharing for sure. My second last question is, if you would give 3 pieces of advice, and that can be covering or summarizing the topic that we have discussed, but also anything else about business or life, what would those be? And you can decide whether it's 3 per person or 3 combined.
I think I love connecting people. For me, connection is extremely important. And try to meet at least one new person a week. And really to meet that person, meaning, is that someone you're looking up to? Write a message. Yes, that person might not reply to you. Happens to me too, but who cares, right? Then move on to the next one. I have so many people who write me. I always take the time to write back. And I have met the most amazing people that have become really good friends, incredibly inspiring people who are very successful in their own rights. And I would have missed out if I would have been close to that fact, to meet new people. So that is definitely one advice. One new person a week.
Well, then one advice would be, don't do a to-do list, do a stop doing list. Declutter, right? It's this amazing picture of this big glass, this where you put first in some big stones, then smaller gravel, then smaller sand, and in the end you can still fill in a bit of water, right, or beer, and that's that I have it from. And so if you start to put in first the sand, then the big stones won't fit in anymore, right? It's really that idea that you have to take from time to time, step back and say, okay, what is this whole thing about, and fix those couple important topics or tasks and block time for it, because all the other stuff will float around anyway and start blocking your agenda and eating your time. But to make sure that you have these few important topics set, and then from time to time go with the agenda and say, are they still important? What has sneaked in that could go out again that is necessary.
Yeah. One thing as well, which I find really important in business, I have seen it in business and when it didn't work or people did not do it, and also in private when it comes to relationships, we're both divorced, so obviously that was as a problem with what I'm going to say now, is communication. To really value communication in business and in private as one of your first priorities at all times, because there can be misunderstandings happen so fast, and we have it in business all the time. I had a conversation as well on WhatsApp with one of my projects that I'm leading, but I was just looking. There was 2 team members who were arguing with each other, and I took them both aside and I was speaking with both, and I said, maybe there's a misunderstanding. One person is really excited about this and the other one has more experience. Maybe, you need to come around in a different way than to understand one another. And I think that happens in business all the time. You have these tensions coming up all the time for the silliest things, right? And I think in a relationship too. So I think it applies to all walks of life, to just communicate more, take the time to communicate more. I know it takes time and it's annoying sometimes. It makes you feel uncomfortable maybe. It's embarrassing maybe to admit that you did a mistake when it comes to a financial plan or a meeting you screwed up, or in the relationship something that your partner will not like. But it's like, one thing that I heard when I with my ex-husband when I was preparing for my marriage there, but I always remembered that a priest told me, actually, and that goes without religion, right? That applies to everything in life. And that priest told me, when you're stung by a rose, you have 2 choices. You either disinfect the wound and it's fine. No one's going to talk about it anymore for very long. You deal with it straight away and it's going to go away. It's going to heal. But if you don't disinfect it, you have a risk of having poisoning, a blood poisoning, and dying of it. And that I always remember that, a short communication after something didn't go the way you planned it, even if it's embarrassing, comes a long way, because it comes around anyways at some point or another, mostly when you really expect it the least. So just get it over with and just talk.
So important. Thanks so much for sharing your...
Pick up the phone. I think people now, even people sitting next to each other, writing emails to one another or WhatsApps. Or we have it here in the house as well sometimes, where Frank writes a message to his daughter on the phone. She's upstairs in the room. He's here. I'm like, just go upstairs. Just knock on the door and talk to her. That as well. Just be more present. Try to talk to people really because they're there and not always communicating. Because when you write an email or when you write a WhatsApp or whatever it is it in business or in private, you say things sometimes you would never say to a person in person. So just be mindful of the power of the words and take time. If you can do it in person or just pick up the phone, do that rather than putting it into words and sending it away.
Yeah, that's a very important message.
Amen. Or maybe a last one.
Go for it, Frank.
Yeah, so I have this ring here. So this is my wedding ring here. And this is my Aura ring. You write it O-U-R-A. It's a ring that has sensors in it and it measures my sleep. And I think that was one of the most important things I ever bought. I always like to, measure, whatever data I can get about my performance, but measuring my sleep was the most eye-opening thing ever, right? So it's and the sleep in general, I think, as a topic, I'm glad it became more important in the last couple of years, but super important. If you sleep enough, if you look for things that how can you sleep more, right? I mean, how can you sleep more efficient? Like, for example, I realized when I'm in bed 8 hours, I only sleep 7 hours because normally I'm 1 hour awake that I don't remember, but I have these moments when I'm awake, right? So then having earplugs is an idea, having eye shade, having the room cooler, especially now with the pregnancy, we're having an air conditioning.
He's freezing.
So it's really cool, but it's very good for my sleep quality, right? And that is really interesting how to optimize sleep, because once you wake up in the morning and you're really refreshed and you're there in your head, then good things happen.
Yeah, it's good that you mentioned that sleep is really one of the crucial things that is overly underestimated, right? And not talked enough. And actually, I'm planning to bring a sleep expert on the show because it is so important to discuss it. How to wind down, how to correctly sleep, so that it's not only about the quantity, right? But it's about the quality. What do you do in those 8 hours? Do you just lie in bed making business plans in your head, or actually you're sleeping and rejuvenating? I usually ask the practical piece of advice that our listeners can take directly, but I think your previous ones have already covered that, and people can pick from them.
We try to be as practical as possible.
I really, really love that, and I appreciate that. Thank you so much for finding time, Tessy and Frank, and I hope you have the beautiful rest of the summer with all the exciting events that are coming.
Thank you so much,
Thank you,
Anna.
Anna.
Same to you, and hello to Iceland. Beautiful country.
Thank you.
You must visit.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Soon.
Let's connect. Yeah, exactly. First you need to grow the family. I think before that it's a bit too soon. Looking forward to meet you in person. Thanks everyone for tuning in, and see you next time.
Thank you very much.